We are greater people than we think we are. There is an ethics crisis going on, but there is a solution to it. And there is a way that we can come together. But that's going to mean being more humble. It's going to mean being more universalist and less tribalist, less ideological, and more just bountiful in our sense of ethics and goodness with each other.
Writer in its natural habitat, you know? I finally got it.
I don't believe in drills. As a former teacher, I believe in authentic writing and really getting into your story.
I think it's each one of our responsibilities that when we learn a particular craft, I think it's kind of your responsibility to share it so that we can take storytelling to a new level.
My mom doesn't understand. My dog just doesn't seem to get it when I talk to him. But when I go to my mastermind group, they get it. They understand we speak common language.
Keep writing, keep creating, never ever stop. Life doesn't stop, so we gotta keep on creating to continue creating the life that we want to create.
You're listening to The Writer Coach. 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 The Writer Coach.
Hello, beloved listeners, and welcome back to the Writing Coach podcast. It is your host, as always, Writing Coach Kevin T. Johns here. This is my first episode in quite a while. Not because I don't love podcasting, not because I don't love you, dear listener. It has just been a crazy busy year for me. In the time since our last episode, I hosted another in-person writing retreat, which was another incredible experience, getting to spend 5 days in the woods away from society, just working with a group of passionate, dedicated writers to help them move forward with their stories. It was an absolutely incredible experience. Huge shout out to all the writers who attended. It was an incredible experience and can't wait to do it again and to continue supporting you on your writing journeys. Since that last episode, I've also released a coloring book. The Frustrated Writers coloring book came out in July. It's my tongue-in-cheek coloring book all about the frustrations that us writers face in our day-to-day lives of trying to get our books done. If you've ever felt like throwing your laptop out the window or lighting your manuscript on fire, grab a copy of the Frustrated Writers coloring book. I know you will get a laugh out of it and maybe find some relaxation and creativity in coloring those pages. Also on the publishing end of things, I have finally finished The Page Turners 3 Fantastic Realms. This is the final book in the trilogy I started almost a decade ago. I published the first 2 books in that trilogy and then moved on to try other things, do other things, but always in the back of my mind, that final book needed to get written, and it is done. We are going to the editor later this month. We'll probably hit a couple, maybe a close friends for some beta reading this month, and then Fantastic Realms will be out in the world before the end of the year or maybe early 2026 so that I can plan an appropriate launch. Still figuring out timelines and details, but of course, I will keep you posted, dear listener, on what I'm doing, what I'm trying, what different marketing and book launch techniques I'm going to be implementing when it comes time to get Fantastic Realms into the world. Now, on today's episode, I'm super excited to share with you my discussion with Ivan Richmond. Ivan is a Wiccan priest, spiritual leader, and the author of Silence and Noise and his new book, The Religion of Good. Raised Zen Buddhist at Green Gulch and the son of priest Lou Richmond, Ivan blends a lifelong spiritual path with deep study in ancient philosophy. A third-degree priest in both Gardnerian and Waxing Moon traditions, he leads the Waxing Moon Coven and teaches widely at pagan events. His work explores ethics, ritual, and the spiritual practice of oneness. as I said, super excited to share with you our discussion. During it, we cover Ivan's journey from a Buddhist upbringing to becoming a Wiccan priest, how rituals like equinox and harvest celebrations use symbolic acts to connect people, why writers' rituals are gateways to flow state and ecstatic experience, why reason and intuition often fall short, and how spiritual practice offers a new path forward, how his book, The Religion of Good, is written specifically to resonate not just with Wiccans, but with Christians, pagans, and atheists alike. You're also going to hear about lunch break rituals and everyday habits that can transform isolation into connection, and much, much more. It's a great discussion, so let's cut to that interview now. Ivan, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Kevin.
This is really exciting because I haven't actually recorded a podcast in a while, so it's great to hit that record button and have some good conversations with good people again.
Yeah.
You grew up with a Zen Buddhist background. I'm somewhat familiar with Zen Buddhism from reading the works of Jack Kerouac. That was something I was always really interested in as a teen. And you now serve as a Wiccan priest, which I know very little about. So how did these spiritual paths, this kind of interesting and diverse background in both Buddhism and Wiccan culture, inform your ethics and spirituality as an adult?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I mean, so as I said, I was raised Zen Buddhist. I grew up in a place called Green Gulch Farm, which is one of the branches of San Francisco Zen Center. My parents are both disciples of Shinryu Suzuki Roshi, the author of Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, and my dad, Lou Richmond, is a Zen Buddhist priest. So I grew up in this sort of kind of monastery slash kind of commune-ish sort of environment. And then, you know, I mean, my parents were very adamant that I could just be whatever religion made sense to me. And so I think when I went off to college, I kind of was very secular. I didn't really think much about religion or spirituality. And interestingly, it was actually two events that got me back into religion and spirituality. One is my dad almost died of viral encephalitis. He's fine now, but this is 1999, and he was in the ICU. And then that brackets this era, 99 to 2001, we have the 9/11 attacks. And I think what got me, so I've always been Zen, and I never left Zen. You know, you don't need to leave Zen because it's a religion that's very conducive to harmonizing with just about anything else. So I felt no need to leave it, but I started asking big questions. My mortality, my dad's mortality, like how do we grow up and mature as people? What are our parents' roles in that? All that kind of big stuff, right? And I felt that I needed more of a mythological framework to kind of make sense of a lot of that. So, there are these people in college who were Wiccans or pagans or something. So I thought I'd check that out. And I ended up meeting this really amazing spiritual mentor, Valerie Voigt, who really just kind of knocked my socks off with how deeply she had gone into Wicca. And I decided to pursue that. And, you know, I got into Wicca around 2001, I think. I became a priest in 2005. And in terms of how both Zen and Wicca have influenced my ethics, both of them are very non-dogmatic in their approach. And I think that's part of the appeal of them for a lot of people. They don't have a bunch of commandments to follow. Zen offers things like meditation. It tries to get you into the Zen state. And I think part of the purpose of this is to get you to see that consciousness is precious, not only for ourselves, but for everyone. And by extension, we should have compassion for all sentient beings. Like I think pretty much every version of Buddhism that I know of has compassion as a prime ethical value. And then Wicca offers techniques for creating our own rituals and our own spiritual practices. It's kind of like what we do. And I think certainly the Wicca that I was raised with, or that I came up in, did. And also that, I mean, for me, just speaking personally as a Wiccan priest, my view on reality, I'm not even going to say divinity, I'm just going to say reality. because I think that way people who don't believe in God can kind of at least resonate with this. Reality is kind of like my true love or my wife. She was the first beautiful thing I saw when I was born. She's the most beautiful thing there is. She's the last beautiful thing I'll see before I die. But it's not always easy to get along with her, right? And what marriage is, it takes work, so that's kind of like, that's a transformative view. Like, the reality isn't an enemy. It's not this harsh place, a harsh abrasive thing that hurts you. It's a lover that you learn to, get into a relationship with.
When you say you're a Wiccan priest, I'm familiar with priests from like Catholicism or Christian religions or whatnot.
Yeah.
What does that look like in the context of Wicca? Is there a church that you go to, or is it more nature-based, or what does that involve?
Yeah. So that's another good question. So Wicca, is a nature religion. We have two deities, a goddess and a god. Our god has horns or antlers, but he's not the Christian devil. Like, a lot of people get freaked out. Like, they go like, oh my gosh, there's this guy with horns. No, he's our god. He's a good guy. And we celebrate the changing of the seasons, the phases of the moon. We're a magico-religious tradition, and that doesn't mean that everybody believes literally in magic. Some people will just talk about magic in purely Jungian psychological terms or something. But the point is, there's, kind of what I would call symbolic rituals that we do that people in some way feel, does something in their lives. And we have a very simple moral system that basically is about trying not to harm people or live in such a way that we minimize our harm to others. And we tend to be very small. We tend to work in circles or covens, like very, very small, intimate groups of about, like, usually no more than about a dozen people. It's usually out of somebody's living room or out of somebody's home. We're not a very wealthy religion, so we don't usually have the means to build big temples or anything. I think if we had unlimited funds, we'd probably build places of worship, but we don't typically. For larger things like the seasonal, what I call the Sabbats, which are like these 8 seasonal holidays, we'll meet in much larger groups. So we'll often meet in groups that are more like dozens of people, maybe at a park or at a Unitarian church we've rented out or something like that.
I'm actually working with another Buddhist client right now, and he was sharing some statistics with me recently. Something like 40% of Americans still believe in like organized religion. I think that's what it is. But the other like 60% have kind of turned away from this kind of Christian tradition. And he was saying that these newer generations, while having kind of turned their backs on formal organized religion, are much more open to paganism and Wiccan and these other, I don't know if you would call them alternative spiritualities or what, but I'm curious, in today's kind of modern world where people are turning their back on the big organized religions, why is something like Wiccan so attractive to younger people today?
There's this sociologist who helped me with my book a little bit, Stephen M. Tipton at Emory University, and that's very much what he said. His specialty is in American religion and specifically American Christianity. And I'm reading his book right now, In and Out of Church, which is about why people are leaving churches. My take, and I can only give you my take.
Sure.
I feel that one thing is that a lot of people are kind of turned off from dogma, from these thou shalt and thou shalt nots, and also turned off from a conception of divinity that is the God as king, ruler, sort of like this father who's kind of going to spank you if you're bad by sending you to hell or something like that. That sort of concept, I think, is not so much the type of divinity that people relate to. I think people don't necessarily want to feel that they have to believe. Like, one thing I discovered first in some college courses I took, but Steve also reiterated this when he talked to me, is I think it's Christianity and Islam are the two major religions that are actually defined by beliefs. Like, you have to believe something to be, you have to have believe in the Christian creed, for instance, to be Christian. At least that's what Christianity has traditionally been. I mean, it might not be that today, but that's how it's traditionally been defined. Whereas a lot of religions are what are called practice defined. So, like, there was this Hindu woman I spoke with once who said, she's atheist. And I said, how does that work? And she said, well, worshiping a loving God makes me more loving. Worshiping a compassionate God makes me more compassionate. What that says to me is that, you can approach these sort of transformative aspects of religion or spirituality, the wisdom of them, of those paths and so forth, an engagement with reality, with the cosmos or whatever, without necessarily having firm beliefs that maybe there even is a god or gods. You can work with it mythologically. There's so many different ways you can work with it, and it's kind of down to you to decide what you believe. We have a joke that if you ask 12 Wiccans what they believe, you'll get 13 answers. And I think that kind of attitude is very appealing right now. So yeah.
Well, you mentioned the magic and the spells and how some people choose to believe in it literally and others choose to think of it metaphorically, perhaps. I've always felt that way about writing to a certain extent. I'm not quite sure whether it's genuine magic or just metaphorical magic, but there's definitely something going on with the writer in that you've taken something that did not exist and you've created something that genuinely exists as a physical thing in the real world using words, right? There's something magical about that one way or the other. So since we're talking writing, tell us a little bit about your book, The Religion of Good, and really what was the moment that book was birthed? We've heard that you've been studying both spirituality and ethics since the turn of the millennium. When did this really solidify as the seed of an idea for a book?
Yeah. So I would say it was really in the pandemic. It was kind of forged out of the pandemic. So Religion of Good is about the spirituality of ethics, but more specifically, I face this ethics crisis. I believe that we're currently in an ethics crisis right now, in that we no longer feel that we can come up with sort of like a theory of ethics that really makes sense to people. We don't have a shared ethics. We don't have like an ethical context for a lot of what we do politically, socially. I feel like it's starting to break down. So let me kind of unpack how I came to, I'll tell you my story here. So it's the pandemic. I'm dutifully sheltering in place. And President Trump is saying there's no health crisis. And it's like, seems absurd because, I mean, the whole world agrees there's a health crisis. I mean, the health experts agree with that. And I don't want to get partisan. I don't want to get political in a partisan sense here. So I don't want to say, there's something wrong with this side or that side in my country. But I just want to unpack sort of what was going on kind of on both sides that alarmed me. So then in the news, I see these anti-masker protesters. I read about, white cops killing black people, and we find out that something like 2.5 times as many black people are killed by the police in America than white people. There's the BLM protests. But then, we hear about, like in my local newspaper, it reported that people are smashing windows, and not saying it was the protesters, because I know there's a lot of debate about who exactly was doing the smashing. But my friend Noah Fisher, who did the cover art for my book, he was there in New York City protesting as part of the BLM protest because he supported that. And so do I. But he confirmed, yeah, people were smashing windows. People were really angry. That was his sense of it, And I'm not saying what happened, but I'm just saying there's this sense of it, right? There's a sense that there's like an ideological war going on right now. We saw people, canceling people. We saw people deplatforming people. And it sort of seems like people have kind of marginalized themselves into these tribes that are kind of like these warring ideological tribes right now that are very moralistic, but moralism is night and day from ethics. Like true ethics is where you have a theory that kind of goes all the way down, that's well rooted, where you can say this is right and this is wrong. Whereas a moralism is more like oftentimes when you don't have those roots, right? Like you don't actually know what's right and wrong, but you kind of rationalize whatever my tribe does is just always right, and whatever the opposition does is just always wrong. I'm not saying there aren't good reasons for why our political factions have been doing what they were doing, but I also see these ideological wars going on. So as a religious leader, I'm helping to run 3 different groups. I'm like the co-clergy person in charge of 3 groups. So it's really down to me to advise my peeps, like if people have ethical questions, I need to be there for them. And I'm kind of starting to realize, it's like it's 2020 or 2021, and I'm starting to realize I don't feel like I could even answer these questions for myself. Like I kind of thought I knew what was right, but it's all just very intuitive, very nebulous. So I hit the books. I had high hopes that if I just studied enough philosophy, I would just figure it all out. And what I actually found is that the philosophy that is reason-based doesn't really get us there. And that's really hard to unpack. I unpack it more in the book, but the really short answer, let me give you a real life example of how rational philosophy can just totally get into a big snarl mess that doesn't end up making any sense. Okay, the Cold War. Like the Cold War was based on 2 different ethical views about the economy. So you have authoritarian communists on the one side versus free market capitalists on the other. The authoritarian communists say what's best for people is for everybody to have what they need. The price we pay for that is that we're going to be authoritarian, we're going to take everybody's rights away, and if you go against the party, we're going to ship you off to Siberia. Whereas the free market capitalists basically say the best possible thing for people is freedom, but if people die in the street of hunger, that's the price we pay for freedom. It's kind of like both of those are actually based on the same ethical theory, which is we should do what's best for everybody. But they both had very, very different takes on things that ended up in this war that could have erupted into nuclear war at any time because they had different conceptions of what happiness looks like. And so what I came to realize, and it's not just me, like I can point at philosophers who have actually said philosophical inquiry into ethics has actually hit a brick wall. Like we're not able to go forward and centralize on this and come up with, to use reason to do it. And I think the problem is there's just too many different ways you can go with things. There's like a zillion different combinations of directions you could go with any of these rational theories. And different people make relevance out of it in different ways. So I basically started to realize we're in an ethics crisis. The whole West, maybe even the world, I don't know, but at least the West. And well, what about intuition, right? Like, well, what happens if my intuition is different from yours? That's almost worse than reason because it's a black box. Like at least with reason, I can explain why we're at war. But, with intuition, it's almost like, well, this is what's gone wrong right now is that these different political factions have different intuitions, or people in them have different intuitions, right? So that really put me into the dark night of the soul because I felt like there's no answer, not even relativism. Like you might even say, well, what about just cultural relativism? But that doesn't really help because like, what if, what I say in the book is, what if you punch me in the nose because your culture demands that you punch people in the nose on alternate Tuesdays? It's small consolation to me and my bloody nose. Ethics are about relationships between people and among people. They're not just about like how you should act or how I should act. They're about how we should relate to each other. And so that's kind of a dead end too. And so the ethics crisis is not knowing a way forward, not knowing a way through the brick wall. But I finally did come up with my answer, which is a spiritual solution, which has to do with all of us as one. It has to do with tuning the spiritual experience of connecting with everybody on the planet and feeling a sense of kind of modeling in our minds what it means to be good based on those interconnections. So it's not a rational approach, but it's a approach of spiritual transformation where we grow from being just these discrete individuals who seem to just like have carte blanche to just do whatever we want to saying, no, I'm not going to steamroll over my fellow person because yes, we're all different and unique, but we're also all part of this interconnected whole.
So that obviously sounds good, this connection of all people and things. But what's that actually look like in practice, in everyday real life?
Yeah. So, well, the other thing I realized is that as a Wiccan priest, I'm kind of in a unique position to share our ritual and spiritual practice development techniques. So I was actually taught this is what makes for good ritual. This is how you design a good ritual. And we do this all the time. Like it could just be, it's the spring equinox coming up and we need to figure out like what's meaningful for people about the spring equinox. Why do we celebrate it? What's that about? And then how do we, like a ritual is a series of symbolic acts, right? What series of symbolic acts has meaning for people? So like, for example, for like a harvest, we're coming up on the autumn equinox right now. So what I'm doing with the waxing moon, one of the circles I'm a high priest for, is we're going to be doing a harvest celebration. And for us, I think it's not just about the harvest, which is kind of abstract in this capitalist age. If you're not a farmer, you kind of don't know what that is. But there's also like the harvest, what we're harvesting as people, like what are the fruits of our labor, of our creativity. So all that to say that I was taught specific techniques for how you develop a ritual or some other spiritual practice. So I go through all that in the book, but the result is something like you could do a chant. Like my favorite chant is, I am we are one, and I am we. And you can chant that over and over, kind of like a mantra. You can develop your own rituals and even your own mythical ideas. Like I have another chant that goes, Mother Earth, blue and green, global girth and crossroad queen. You don't have to believe in Mother Earth as a goddess. Like you don't have to believe there's a real divinity there, but the earth is real. We're real, like the world's real, right? So this is a symbol for all of us together. And so you're kind of like invoking this kind of mythological personage, but it's a mythological personage that means something, right? Or you could invoke a mythological personage like Lady Liberty or Lady Justice to get like a handle or grip on what that is. And there's even this guy I like at University of Toronto, John Vervaeke, who does the cognitive science of spirituality. And he even talks about how these kind of rituals where you're interacting with these mythological concepts kind of help to model, if I understand him right, like they actually help you to model your conception of these things in your mind so that you have this model to fall back on. You don't just think it all through logically. You have a model in your mind that guides you. And that's what I'm trying to guide people through in the book.
I imagine most of the listeners of this podcast are writers or writing coaches who are usually writers as well. So I think listeners probably understand to some extent already the value of ritual. I think most writers have, whether it's pour themselves a coffee or go to the coffee shop or put a special robe on or whatever, everyone has their little rituals to get into the writing mood. But I often think that it's not just about getting into the writing mood, it's about getting into flow state once you are writing. And I know in the book you talk about rituals as being a sort of pathway to ecstatic experiences. Could you tell us, to me that sounds a lot like flow state perhaps. Can you expand a bit more on what you say about ecstatic experiences in the book?
Yeah, well, flow state is, for me, I would say that's a type of ecstatic experience. And in fact, this guy I mentioned, John Vervaeke, talks a lot about flow states. So yeah, exactly. So the idea, so my view is that goodness is an ineffable mystery. And that's one reason why reason has so much trouble touching it. For me, it's kind of like that parable of the blind people and the elephant. It's like all these different individuals, all these different cultures with all different religions are trying to touch up on this. But like in the story, the blind people, like one guy touches the trunk and thinks it's a snake, and one guy touches a tail and thinks it's a rope. but actually it's an elephant. And so it's like we've made all these attempts in humanity to get touch points on this good thing, and we all have a different perspective on it. And I think that's why there's so many different cultural values about it, but I think there's actually a real thing there. I don't think it's just we're just making things up. I think there's goodness is real, but we have to figure out how to touch that. So how do you touch an ineffable mystery? Through spiritual techniques. What is that like? It's basically like you get into this altered state of consciousness, and ecstatic literally comes from Latin, meaning out of stasis. So out of yourself. So you have to somehow spiritually get out of yourself, as it were, to kind of make contact with these other souls that are out there, if that makes sense. I don't mean soul in like the literal, like going to heaven, going to hell, kind of thing, but I mean like other people, we're these consciousnesses, and I don't know what goes on in your consciousness and you don't know what goes on in mine, but we can touch up against each other, because there's also, from another perspective, there's no point at which I end and the cosmos begins, no point at which the cosmos ends and you begin. So to some extent, we actually flow together. And to some extent, who we are is contextualized within our community and within humanity, because like if we were just all alone in the world, we wouldn't have I don't think we'd know who we are. I think we just kind of go insane. So that's the spiritual attempt to touch up on the mystery of what all of us together is like. But I also say in the book that it's like if you parachute over Hawaii, you might not land in Waikiki Beach. So I think that it's like you need both you need myth, ritual, and ecstatic experiences together. Because like you could just go to like a rock concert and just go like, oh my God, that was so awesome. Like I just went out of my mind and just kind of like went into the music, like you could do that. But what's the purpose of that? Just to have a good time? What ritual and myth do is myth is, for me, is like the vocabulary that we use to, like you talk about writing, right? Like it's the vocabulary and grammar that we use to talk about the ineffable. And ritual is forming sentences out of that. It's like how we interact with these ineffable mysteries. And you need to kind of like symbolize all of that to kind of like put your mind on autopilot, because once you go into an ecstatic state, like you can't just stop it and think, what should I be thinking about right now? Like you're not thinking, like you're going into a state in which like it's a Zen state or a flow state or a deep contemplative state or whatever, a transcendent state. And you're just going to be in that state until you kind of come back down to earth, if you see what I mean. So you have to kind of like pre-program the autopilot so that you do land at Waikiki Beach, not just anywhere in the Hawaiian Islands, if that makes sense.
I'm very confident this book is going to appeal to neo-pagans or the Wiccan community. It's kind of built for those folks. But what about that remaining 40% of Americans who are part of an organized religion already, or for perhaps us godless Canadian atheists? What, if anything, might we get out of this book?
This book is absolutely made for everyone. The subtitle is for people of any religion or none. I really mean it. I put my money and my words where my mouth is. And I actually intended the book to be for everyone. Like, obviously, I think just in terms of marketing a book like this, it tends to show up in the occult shops, in the New Age shops, because that's how it's marketed. But I think that anybody, first of all, of another religion, I think like people who are Christian, whether they're Protestant or Catholic or they're Jewish, can really get something out of this. And I already have met people who are of other religions. I did a reading at like a writers group that I'm in, fellow writers, and there's this Catholic woman who's also, I think, on a spiritual journey, and she was like really nodding and like really kind of like tuned in to what I was saying. I've talked to really devout Jews who really connect with it as well, and I think that absolutely for the non-religious atheist Gnostic crowd, I think this is in a sense kind of the book for you if you want to get at ethics and you want to take a spiritual approach to it, and you feel that we are in an ethics crisis and that all these ways that we have available to us aren't working, and you want to try a spiritual way of connecting with this goodness thing, this all of us as one thing, this will absolutely be the book for you, because you don't have to believe anything. Like, what I say is, when you work with mythological ideas like Lady Justice or Mother Earth or something, I mean, you don't have to believe that those are goddesses. You could just believe justice is real, the world's real, we're real, humanity's real. You could use ritual as simply just, and ecstatic practices as simply just a way to connect with this something larger than yourself. That could be humanity, that could be the world. It doesn't have to be God. Yeah, this is definitely made with the idea in mind that somebody who has no concept of God could still use these techniques to make these, not only make important connections to help you develop your moral compass, not only interconnect with other people, dialogue with them, have interfaith with them, and a sort of ethical interfaith, not just interfaith of religions, but interfaith of different conceptions of ethics, but also to actually have a transformative experience. Like, for me, I actually practice what I recommend in the book. Every single day, I do something spiritual, sometimes twice a day, sometimes even 3 times a day, sometimes like a little thing on my lunch break. But I actually use techniques that I developed in my book for myself to develop myself. And what I've found is that it's transformative, because it transforms us from just these individual discrete people to these interconnected people. And I think that's going to be of real value to everyone, regardless of where you are in the religion spectrum.
It's a complicated topic, and the book covers so much, but if there was, say, one big takeaway that you want readers to leave the book with, what might that takeaway be?
The takeaway would be that you can model goodness for yourself. You can develop your moral compass. You can connect with other people. We are greater people than we think we are. There is a solution. First of all, there is an ethics crisis going on, but there is a solution to it. And there is a way that we can come together. But that's going to mean being more humble. It's going to mean being more universalist and less tribalist, less ideological, and more just bountiful in our sense of ethics and goodness with each other.
Well, for listeners who want to check out the book and learn more about you, where can we send them?
ivanrichmond.com is my website. There's a sign up there for my email list. You can get announcements about my events on my email list. You can get like little rituals and spiritual practices that you can do like in the middle of your lunch break and things like that. And the other thing about signing up for my email list is you will get a free copy of the first chapter of my book in PDF, so you can check it out and see if it's for you.
Fantastic. I think you also have a YouTube channel where folks can check you out, correct?
Yes, I do. It's called Religion of Good, just exactly the same title as my book. If you want to know the link to it, it's on my website, ivanrichmond.com. And you just go to books, and then you go to The Religion of Good, and you'll see the YouTube there. I think it's also in the bottom corner of my website as well. Just anywhere on the website, you can go to the footer and click on the YouTube icon, and it will take you right there. And yeah, I have videos on the ethics crisis, and I'm going to be making videos pretty soon on demonstrating the actual techniques in my book so that you can either follow along with them or see how they're done. So I'll do chants and I'll do rituals and all that kind of stuff. So you can actually, rather than just having to read about them and imagine what they're like, you can actually see somebody actually do them.
Well, Ivan, it's been such a pleasure working with you these last few months to help get word out there about the book. And it was really exciting to get you on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining me on the Writing Coach podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Kevin.
There you have it, my friends, my interview with my client, Ivan Richman. I'll post links to everything Ivan mentioned on the show notes for this episode. This is episode 215 of the Writing Coach podcast. Head over to www.kevintjohns.com to get all those links. And while you're there, go ahead and pick up a copy of the Scene Alchemy Essentials checklist. That's the free checklist I give away with 20 questions you can ask yourself about any scene you've written to help you take it from good or average all the way to literary gold. That is it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next episode of The Writing Coach.